we're going to introduce you to start the show to a young woman named Claudia Arias. Claudia should have graduated from the University of Tacoma this past weekend, but she didn't. It was ripped away from her at the very last minute because she dared to question an aspect of radical gender ideology. I hope that after you hear Claudia's story, her story will do for you what it's done for me since we first spoke to her behind the scenes last week. And that is really reinvigorate me and recommit me to the cause of common sense. And I hope it'll do the same for you. And it'll also encourage you and give you one more reason and give you the bravery that each and every one of us who has common sense needs to speak out about things that aren't right, regardless of what we might have at stake. So let me tell you a little bit about Claudia Arias. So Claudia has a remarkable backstory, and she decided, because of some of her own personal experiences in life, that she wanted to go to school to become a social worker.
I've been interested since I was pretty young. I was a teen parent, and being a teen parent kind of gave me that feel of wanting to help others. Now, I didn't have that much help when I was younger, so I wanted to make sure that I'm looking out for other people that don't have what I didn't have when I was younger. So I want to make sure that I'm helping people in general.
Yeah, you also have a really fascinating background. You fled the Civil War in El Salvador?
I did. I arrived, I think it was when I was about 3 years old with my mom. And it's been a rough ride since then.
It's been a rough ride, but again, she wanted to take this personal experience of hers, being a teen mom as a child with her mother fleeing El Salvador, and she wanted to use that for good and go to school for social work and try to give back to other people who are going through difficult experiences in their life and young people. What a noble cause that is. So Claudia, because of some of the things she had gone through, being a young mom, it took her a long time to work toward her degree. She had spent more than a decade trying to get her social worker degree, but last spring she was almost there. She was almost there. She was going through a couple remaining classes. She had a couple last assignments that she needed to do, including an assignment that was given to her in the spring of 2023 to do what the professor called a zine, which is just a short magazine, essentially, that you would put together a short magazine on a topic of your choosing. And Claudia decided, when trying to figure out what this topic would be, that she really wanted to do something about women's rights.
My first thought was, women's rights. I think women fought for their rights for quite a bit of time. And I thought, this is very important. So that's what I started searching for, women's rights. And then as I came across more information, I started, it was a basic assignment, copy and paste information from articles or resources that I had found. So none of it was really in my own words. It was just copied and pasted from court documents and articles and resources.
Gotcha. And that was the assignment, to take stuff from other
That was the
sources and
assignment.
compile it.
Yes.
Yeah, so women's rights, nothing controversial about that. So she proceeds trying to put this zine together, which is exactly as it sounds, just a short mini sort of magazine. And she puts together this really kind of crudely put together draft copy, because there's an opportunity to show a draft to the professor to get a little bit of feedback from the professor, and then to proceed and put together your final assignment. So Claudia sent us photos of this draft zine that she'd put together on women's rights. And as she looked into this issue, she started honing in even further on the issue of women's rights behind bars. Again, that doesn't sound like a very controversial topic at all. So here's again just a picture of the draft zine for those who are watching the show. That cover says women's rights, and then it gets into the dangers some women face while incarcerated. It gets into PREA, which, if you're not familiar with PREA, is the Prison Rape Elimination Act. Now, sexual assault behind bars is unfortunately very common, and that's why PREA exists. It's supposed to basically set standards for detention facilities and prisons to try to do what they can to prevent both male and female inmates from being raped. Again, nothing really controversial here. So women's rights, even more specifically, she wants to do her assignment on women's rights behind bars. But here's where Claudia made a mistake. at least in the eyes of the woke staff at the University of Tacoma. Claudia decided to hone the topic in even further and set her sights on the issue of female inmates being raped by transgender inmates who they were cellmates with.
I came across a video that talked about women being raped in prison. And I thought that is just an unjust situation that these women have been put in. And I thought, this is not okay. This is happening in our society. And I don't think that it is okay. And I think that people should advocate for these women. They're in danger and it is not safe for them. And I think they have the right to speak up and we should be there to advocate for them.
So the video that she came across, which sparked her interest in that topic specifically, was a video from James O'Keefe. We played this report on the show before, where James O'Keefe did an investigative report into what was happening in Washington state women's prisons when it came to biological men being put in the same cells as women because they said that they were transgender. Here's a clip from that James O'Keefe report.
I don't have anything against them. I just don't want to sleep in there with them. We don't have a voice. We don't have a leg to stand on. Anytime we voice these types of things, we are met with ridicule, targeting, bias, punishment, solitary confinement.
So Claudia decided she was going to share in this assignment that was now on women's rights to feel safe even while incarcerated. She was going to include this report from James O'Keefe and the voices of female inmates saying some of the stuff that was happening to them or was happening to other women behind bars. And so again, in this draft assignment that she showed the professor, she actually included a link to the James O'Keefe report and wrote footage inside Washington State's Correctional Center for Women shows a distressed inmate sounding off about the prison's transgender-friendly policy. As a result of the policy, violent male offenders are put in positions where they can take advantage of female inmates, including in the same cell. When she presented this draft assignment to her professor at the University of Tacoma, according to Claudia, her professor absolutely lost it.
And the professor immediately after she saw the scene, she just got up, extended her arm, and said, "You're targeting transgender," and covered her mouth, and her face looked flushed, walked to her podium. Another student asked her, can I get your help? And the professor said, not right now, not right now. So I didn't know what to do. I said, I don't understand. What did I do wrong? What happened here? And I didn't get any explanation at the moment. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. And I kept on saying, I don't understand. What did I do wrong? I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. Like, I just couldn't understand what had happened. I felt confused. I felt frustrated.
She just said she tried to talk to the professor. Professor didn't want to hear it. She ends up packing up her stuff, leaving class, trying to contact the professor later, saying, hey, can I maybe schedule office hours with you to talk about what happened? The professor kept saying no. And I would also say that in this draft assignment, which again, it's just a draft assignment on a very legitimate topic, had the professor bothered to continue to read into it, the professor would have seen that Claudia Arias isn't transphobic. I mean, in this very assignment, she wrote that, this is a quote, all male prisoners as well as those who identify as transgender have the right to be safe in prison, and talks about some people who believe that not providing transgender medical care for an inmate who's incarcerated amounts to cruel and unusual punishment under the Eighth Amendment. So she goes into different sides of this issue. But this professor, so ideologically triggered, was absolutely not having it. So again, Claudia attempts to talk through it with the professor like an adult. That isn't successful. But the professor ends up sending her an email saying that she violated professional standards for a social worker or someone who wants to go into social work. So shortly after Claudia got that email from the professor, she got another email from the university.
I received another email from the Professional Standards Committee minutes after I had scheduled an appointment with the chair of the department.
Yeah.
So I have no idea what the Professional Standards Committee was. I have never been expelled or disciplined in any way of the 14 plus years that I've been in school. Never had I experienced anything like this.
Yeah. But because of this, and because of the professor's anger that she would dare do a report on some of the dangers to women who are incarcerated, including being housed with biological men, Claudia Arias winds up in front of the University of Tacoma's ethics committee to try to explain herself. And after this hearing that she got, which was a total sham, they ended up sending her a letter telling her what she had to do to make it right, what she had to do to stay in the social worker program. She had to write 2 essays, essentially admitting that she's a terrible transphobe and that she did something wrong. The first essay, it said you'd have to write about a social worker's responsibility to trans individuals. And for the second essay, she would have to write about ethical and professional behavior and communication. And the letter was horrible. I mean, basically saying that you need to learn, you need to be self-reflected, you need to grow, you have a duty of a certain level of care if you want to be a social worker to transgender patients. So you need to write these 2 essays. One on your commitment to trans individuals, the second on ethical and professional behavior and communication. And I asked Claudia, well, what did they say? How did you behave unprofessionally? Is there something that happened behind the scenes where that was also part of what your punishment was supposed to be? Not only write an essay about your duty to care for transgender patients, but also about behaving professionally. And she said the only thing that she could think about is when she had a meeting with the head of the program, she inadvertently, apparently, news to her, had been misgendering the professor who lost it about the draft assignment.
The chair of the department didn't allow me to speak freely. Every time I would speak and I would say her or she would immediately correct me and tilt her head and say they, them, they, them. I felt she was patronizing me. I felt uncomfortable. I felt alone. I didn't know what to do.
So here she is in this high pressure situation, head of the department, trying to explain, hey, this is what happened. I did this draft assignment. Here's what it was about. The professor lost her mind. And the chair of the department's going, they, them, they, them, they, them. It gives you some insight into how hostile and ideological this situation was, and also why the professor, who apparently identifies as they, them, would have reacted in the way they did to a report about transgender inmates raping female inmates in Washington State's prison system. So she was lost, confused, didn't know what to do, had this basically dictate saying, hey, if you want to continue to be in our program, you're going to have to write these 2 essays admitting that you're a horrible person and a transphobe. And one thing that Claudia Arias knew for sure she was not going to do is write those essays. You opted not to write those essays. Why?
I opted not to write those essays because they never answered any of the questions that I had asked them. They gave me the pushback, reflect on myself type of response. And I felt like I had no support whatsoever from anyone in the university. Not the advocates, not the professors, not the chair of the department, no one provided any support whatsoever. And I thought, if I write these essays, there's nothing telling me that they're not going to use it against me.
So she didn't write them. And look, what they were accusing her of was unreal. Think about that. A legitimate situation involving women and women's safety behind bars, being housed with biological men, examples in instances of rape or fear. That's what she wanted to write about. And she ends up before an ethics committee that tells her that what she did didn't align with social workers' professional values regarding gender inclusive of trans individuals. Despite writing in her report, trans individuals behind bars have a right to feel safe too. But that didn't matter. She'd gone too far, at least in the eyes of the professor who goes by they, them. So Claudia should have graduated this past Friday. after more than a decade of work trying to become a social worker, her whole extensive life history, everything she's been through, she didn't get to graduate this past Friday. They took it all away from her.
They dropped me from the program. They dropped me from my first gen student program. They dropped me from everything, from being on the dean's list 3 to 4 times. They dropped me from everything on December 8th. And they basically ripped it away from me just like that. Without any care whatsoever. I only had 4 classes left.
Wow.
And 4 classes left, and they were only practicum. I was ahead of other students because I had transferred from a different university to this university in Washington. So I only had 4 classes. And graduation is this Friday, and they took it away from me.
So you would have been graduating this Friday.
This Friday, I would have been graduating. And to think that, I struggled so much, and endless sleepless nights. I mean, you know what it's like to go to school and study and work so hard for it, time away from your family, time away from things, and it's like you're wanting to reach a goal, and then for somebody just to yank it away from you just like that.
So you have sought legal counsel with someone our viewers will be familiar with, Joan Mell. What is your goal with that?
My goal with that is that this does not happen to any other student, whether they're younger or whether they're older. Nobody really other than my husband and close friends knows what I have been through, what this has done to me. I worked so hard for it. And just for something like that to be taken away from you without any care in the world, for something that the professor could have had a better approach or better ways of communicating, just to take it away, it's very unfair. So my goal with this is for this not to happen to any other student. I know that graduating on Friday, it's not going to happen as of right now for me, but that is my main goal. I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. And I think that this is something that I've had my entire life. I want to see people advance in life. I want to see people have opportunities. I want to see people move forward. It makes me happy. God. But they took that happiness away from me. But it's okay. I'm still here at heart, and I'm going to keep moving forward to helping people as much as I can.
Shameful. Absolutely shameful of UW Tacoma. Who knew there could be such consequences for sticking up for women who are being raped, all in the name of radical gender ideology? It has to stop. It has to end. I am proud of Claudia for sticking up for herself, for not writing some stupid essays admitting she's a transphobe when she's not, just in order to keep on this path. I'm proud of her for now seeking legal action against the University of Washington Tacoma, because someone needs to hold them accountable for this and to make sure, like she said, that it doesn't happen to someone else. I will note Nicole reached out to the University of Washington Tacoma for comment on some of the things that Claudia says were happening behind the scenes. Certainly Claudia provided us with all the letters and email exchanges and all of that, but we wanted UW Tacoma to have an opportunity to respond. Their director of communications, John Burkhart, sent us this email. Not a surprise. He says, due to federal laws meant to protect students' rights to privacy, the university can't comment on specific cases involving student academic records. In general, the UW Tacoma social work program is designed in partnership with national professional organizations, and among other academic requirements, students entering the program must fully engage in and meet the standards, values, and ethics of the profession. Students who do not meet the standards of a particular academic program may be dropped from that program. However, they remain enrolled in the university and are free to pursue other programs or majors. Yeah, after 10 years trying to become a social worker. Oh, well, she's just dropped from the social worker program, but she's free to pursue other programs or majors. So basically, she's free to start all over. Either she can go to another school and try to finish her social worker degree there, or she can just as easy as that. Yeah, let me stay at the school that did this to me and pursue another program or major entirely. Absurd. Shame on UW Tacoma. If you're giving them money, take it away now. Don't give them a freaking dime until they admit what they did and until they take accountability for it. It is time to de-woke our institutions. The fact that you could have someone like Claudia, who went through all of these experiences in her life that make her perfectly suited to become a social worker, fleeing from a third world country as a child, becoming a teen parent. That's someone who has just so much empathy and knowledge and understanding to provide other human beings, taken from her because she dared to speak out about biological men, prison inmates, being housed in the same cell as biological women. It's crazy. And it's in keeping with the state of Washington, too. The state of Washington hides records on transgender inmates and what they've done or accused of doing. You're not allowed to question it at all. You're not allowed to look into it. You're not allowed to investigate it. And apparently, you're not allowed to talk about it in a draft assignment in a social worker course. Just insane stuff. We cannot get on the right path as a country until our educational institutions stop pushing their extreme ideologies on kids as young as elementary and up through college. I will say on this note today, some breaking news that I think is a wonderful step forward, that the president of the University of Washington announces that she is going to be stepping down in June of 2025, Anna Marie Cossey. Now, I think she should be fired, or at least resign effective immediately, for her horrible handling of the anti-Semitic protests that happened on the campus of the University of Washington for weeks on end. Now, whether this is a result, whether she's deciding to leave that post after a decade because of blowback, pushback, because people are pulling money from the university, I hope that's why. I hope that's why she feels the need to leave. And maybe that's an indication that financially, that's how you get them. I guarantee that the University of Washington, the Seattle campus, was facing monetary consequences from donors for allowing the anti-Semitism to flourish on campus, for allowing a fringe group of some students and outsiders to take over the campus for weeks. So maybe that's what we have to do. And maybe now we have to extend it to the University of Washington, Tacoma, to rip at the last minute the ability of a young woman who has worked a decade to become a social worker to enter a profession like social work. How many young people these days want to do something like that anymore? They all want to be freaking influencers. I say that as we do a podcast where I'm essentially a glorified influencer. They want to be influencers or do something like that. She wants to help people. Going through years of work, not to mention all the classes she already paid for up to that point. And for what? And that's the kind of person, because of a radical ideology that has clearly infiltrated the University of Washington, Tacoma. Because of that, this young woman, Claudia Arias, at least not through them, can't go on to help people in the field of social work. Absolutely shameful. And we're not going to let this go. I mentioned Joan Mell. We've had on the show a couple times. She's taken on public records cases. She's also representing one of the former Tacoma police officers acquitted of murder in his claims against the city of Tacoma and the state of Washington. Joan Mell has taken on this case. We love Joan Mell. I told you when we first met Joan Mell, I was like, Joan, I feel like you're my best friend, because she just cares. She understands. She has common sense. She's sane, and she's willing to stick up for people, to do what's right, put herself out there. And so we appreciate her taking up Claudia's case. Unreal. Can't wait to hear you guys' comments on this one.